moderator of our panel is my good friend and our avalanche forecaster, Gabrielle Antonioli. And if you haven't met Gabrielle yet, poor you, here she is. Gabrielle. That's all you get, kid.
Oh no, it's going to slide down the podium. All right. Thanks, Lynn. This is actually a Lynn Wolf shirt as well, so I'm kind of hoping to get some Lynn Wolf energy.
Yeah, baby.
Up here. I'm actually going to have our panel come out and sit and introduce themselves because I think they can speak better who they are. So let's give them a hand. And then after we do that, I'm going to do a little story time and kind of get behind the reasoning why we're having this panel today. So let's start with Ethan, because he just went.
Hello. Yeah, my name's Ethan Davis. I'm a forecaster for the Sawtooth Avalanche Center. I also help out with the National Avalanche Center on projects like the one I just presented on. But I'm originally from a small town in eastern Oregon, and I snowboard, ski, and snowmobile, none of which very well.
My name is Aaron Case. I born and raised in the Idaho Falls area and currently live there now that I got school and all that stuff over with and got out of Utah. So that was nice. I own a company called Stable Mountain, and we do rentals and tours in the area in the Big Holes and in Island Park with the Mountain Riding Labs, Matt and Will. And we're new to the avalanche education, and so me and my partners, we've been really hungry and eager, and we just recently fire hosed our way through ITCs and CLTs and providerships and all that kind of stuff. And so this is something that we've seen a hole in the Idaho Falls area for a really long time, and this is our solution to helping out with that, is getting educated and getting in place to provide that education and that forecasting and stuff like that. And so it's really nice to come to the WYSAW and connect with people that have those same concerns and goals.
Hey everybody, Will Mook, live over in Victor, spent 6 years over on this side though before moving. Background, was a backcountry snowmobile guide at Togody Mountain Lodge for 7 years. Co-founded the Mountain Riding Lab with my partner Matt Shebaum. We are an Erie motorized avalanche rec course provider and have been since 2017. My other day job is executive director for AMPL, Advocates for Multi-Use of Public Lands. And I got teammates in the back there on Teton County, Idaho Search and Rescue.
All right, Ryan Murtaugh. I'm a volunteer for Teton County Search and Rescue. Joined the team in 2015 and also teach avalanche education for the American Avalanche Institute, as well as Erie curriculum for Jacksonville Mountain Guides. And this year for the Mountain Riding Lab, which I'm psyched about, getting on the moto side of things. And then kind of background, heavy both in backcountry skiing and backcountry snowmobiling. So I love them both the same. It's a huge internal conflict for me when it's a really good snow day as to whether I'm riding a sled or going human-powered. So it's a good problem to have.
Hello, everyone. I'm Tana Hoffman. I am on the board for the Bridger Teton Abbey Center Foundation. And I've been a motorized participant for the past 10 years. I also love skiing, snowboarding, and snowmobiling, but I've definitely gotten into the motorized a lot more in the past decade, especially since I moved down to Alpine. So certainly, the topic facing southeastern Idaho has really impacted our community. Since then, I'm supported by 2B Outerwear, and I spend as much time as I can trying to bring women together for backcountry adventures. Sometimes those are winter clinics, motorized clinics, and also, just a lot of other community-based adventures, and just trying to get more women out there and get them the right resources and get them excited about being in the outdoors.
Awesome. Give them a hand, everyone. And before I get into asking these great folks some questions, I kind of want this to be like an active listening thing. And for that, I'm kind of going to build on what Sarah spoke of earlier of like perspective. And how I want you to listen to this is in the shoes of someone else. So to do that, I want you to imagine that you move to a community, and the thing to do in that community is sled in the winter. And that's it. That's how you access the mountains. That's what there is. And so you go about trying to gain skills, meet friends that way. There's no avalanche education. There is no avalanche forecast. Even to do something as simple as find weather stations. Like, how do you find the names of random NRCS weather stations unless they're listed on a map? It's quite hard. So you go about learning skills. You trigger a lot of avalanches on the way, but sort of out of culture and out of independence. There's a necessity of independence in that, right? You kind of have to learn to operate on your own. And then you go take an avalanche course. You have to rent skis for it because the closest one is on foot, where they teach you avalanche rescue on foot, which isn't necessarily useful for you because you're on obviously a motorized device, and usually a lot of that rescue can be from the bottom up instead of top down. But you apply those skills, you wear a beacon. Folks in your group, sometimes they don't, but that's your friend group, that's what you have. And culturally, maybe that's a little bit more acceptable too. So you're playing around on the slope one day, and you trench your sled up in the trees here, and you're wearing an airbag too, but all of a sudden, like before you can even think, the slope is gone around you, and you end up buried at the bottom. Luckily with one hand out, and they're able to get you out in 5 minutes. So this is kind of illustrates, what can happen in these areas. This is also my cousin, so I'm pretty happy that ended well, as it did. This is an incident in Montana. But again, as you listen to this, remove those degrees of separation that we can put between ourselves and other groups, and think about that. So let's go. So my first question, and you guys don't have to ask this in any order, and you don't have to answer every question, but I want you to speak to questions that you want the community to hear and that you think will impact how they think about these things. So how has motorized use changed in the past 5 years, and what do you predict will happen in the next 5 to 10?
I think the simplest answer is it's exploding. Seeing a lot more of it. Machines are getting a lot easier to operate, a lot easier to get. There's a lot more accessible trails. And I'm also seeing a lot more women out there, which is really exciting. But in the next 5 years, I just see it growing more. I think that's my simplest answer.
Yeah, I'd agree that it's going to continue growing, and kind of what I've noticed in the last 5 years is, 5-10 years ago, some of this terrain that was being accessed that's deep and scary and spooky was being accessed by a very select group of individuals. But now with technology advancing, there's more and more individuals that are accessing that terrain that's really hard to get to. And I think that's going to continue. We're going to see more and more people in that hard to get to terrain, that's complicated, complex terrain versus the simple fields.
I think the riding style has changed quite a bit also over the last even just 10 years. As snowmobile technology has improved, it's less about how high up a hill you can climb and then turn around and come back down, commonly known as high marking. They're a lot lighter, more powerful now, and they're very nimble. So to challenge ourselves, we spend a lot of time in steep trees, creek beds, terrain traps. I think that accident that Frank shared earlier today is pretty commonplace. That terrain is very commonplace for snowmobilers to be riding these days, more so than the big obvious slide path.
One thing that I noticed is that there are just a lot more snow bikers, and that technology is increasing quite rapidly. And it's interesting to see the different types of terrain that snow bikers are accessing that I didn't see snowmobilers in previously. And yeah, so it'll be interesting to watch the use patterns in that regard as well.
Awesome. Yeah, and we've sort of seen this with skiing, right? In a lot of ways. It's like motorized culture is a little bit behind the curve, but as ski equipment got lighter, right, there were definitely like differences in like people's ability to access terrain without necessarily having like the experience or the education that enabled them to be fully aware of the risk too. So similar kind of curves as those things grow. What are common misconceptions people have, and how can we combat these and communicate more effectively as a broader community?
Because it has a motor, it's easy. Yeah, I think there's kind of a big ignorance on kind of the side of the table that doesn't fully understand what we do. And I think that's challenging. Something else that like I'm super passionate about, and I've heard a lot of talk about like community and one love, right? We don't always feel that from the ski community, and I think that's partly why there's only a handful of us in this room. I think WYSAW has done a really good job integrating snowmobile culture into these workshops. But there's like organizations in the ski industry that actively try to shut us out of public lands. That's really hard, right? It's like something that we are passionate about, and it gets me really fired up. And I'd love to build that community and not feel that kind of hate or looking down upon.
Awesome.
Yeah, I guess a misconception that, like I said, I spend just as much time on the ski side of things as I do on the motorized side of things. And, you know, it's always fun to kind of take a back seat when I'm with some friends that don't snowmobile, and we get some snowmobilers going through that are ripping kind of through the group. But the same thing happens with other skiers too. It's just not as loud and noticeable. But yeah, I think one of the common misconceptions too is kind of like aggressive, like redneck personalities are associated with snowmobilers. There's a lot of you that know me in this room, and for the last 18 years of my life, I've had big, long, beautiful dreadlocks, and I have a pretty mellow personality, but I really like a loud snowmobile as well. It gets me like super psyched up when I'm riding. So it's just like, I guess what I'm getting at here is like, you got to get to know the person. Just because they're on a really bright colored sled and it makes a lot of noise doesn't mean they're super aggressive. And they probably want to chat and find out where the good snow is, and then they might point you in the direction too of some good snow. So.
Yeah, on top of that, I think a lot of people don't see that snowmobiling is also really big for families and for couples. Like it's an amazing family activity, and you know where we are, and certainly further down in Star Valley, you get out on those trails, and Saturday it's mom, dad, and the kids, and they're going to races, and it's something that I think a lot of people that aren't embedded in the snowmobile community might not see, but there is a whole nother side to it, just like skiing and snowboarding. Day at the resort, day on the trails.
Awesome. Great answers. Yeah, and I can speak to that too of like being the intern in the Gallatin back in like 2017, and Doug Jabot was forcing me to sled. And at first I just hated it because all I did initially was walk around, and it seemed so counter to what I was used to. And it just took that exposure to like actually doing it and seeing the people out there, talking to them. And I was like, oh yeah, this is great. Like, these people are awesome. They're really willing to learn, and it's more just like the barriers to that are a lot higher. So what behaviors can folks foster to manage complex avalanche conditions, especially in those border zones that don't really have a forecast?
I'm going to take this from kind of a 30,000-foot view, but I think that one thing that kind of gets left out of the conversation before we get to, is there an AVI forecast and what can we do to mitigate once people are already there? I think that sometimes we forget about a user group. If you look at the entry point, so most of us at this table, maybe not all of us, most of us in this room, if you snowmobile, there's a good chance that a lot of you started out skiing or snowboarding. And so whether or not you were consciously aware of it, you were exposed to ideas of avalanche awareness. Being in a town like this with ski culture, we have fatalities and incidents written about in our local paper. You hear every time you go up the tram, if you don't know, don't go. Like you're learning about risks of avalanche. And there's another user group who, and I've met a lot of these individuals who get into snowmobiling from a different entry point. It's because they love motorsports. Maybe they moved out here and their favorite activity is, riding motorcycles or ATVs. And they're like, oh, snowmobiling is a way that I can do this in the winter. And they don't necessarily have that background of like, oh, avalanche awareness is something I need to be worried about when they're just getting started. So I'm kind of taking this a little bit in another direction, but I just think it's important to bring up because I think that before, like, the AVI forecast is really important and the awareness classes are really important, but I think we also have to take a step to meet people where they start. I think that, dealerships have a responsibility to tell people when you're buying your 900 and you're going into this terrain, these are the things that you should be aware of, and maybe you want to come to one of our AVI awareness classes because they might not want to drop $700 to go take a class where they're like, I don't even know how to powder turn, I don't even know if I'm going to stick with this. So I would just say that there's probably a lot of behaviors that we can do in AVI territory, but I think that we have to look at that user journey and meet people where they start so that they know what they're getting into.
Yeah, we don't have like riding zones that are bombed for us to go have a safe learning experience. We're thrown into the mix right from the get-go. I would say seek out mentorship. It's kind of the same for skiers. Even though we don't have a huge contingency in our sport with professional level avalanche training, we have riders in our community with decades and decades of experiential education, and they're still a really good resource. Obviously, we want to pair that with formal education, and we're playing catch up in that regard.
I'd say something that's super important is to remain curious, and it really doesn't matter how you're accessing the backcountry. I heard a speaker one time say that Mother Nature doesn't really care about what you know, but she cares more about what you don't know and does that more often. And I've always remembered that. And it seems like the more and more time you spend out in the backcountry, the more nuanced the way you travel is, and the more you're surprised about how little you actually knew when you started. And I think just remaining humble and keeping that in your back pocket as you're traveling around is always something super important.
Tana, can you actually talk a little bit about being a woman? A motorized user? Which talk about being a woman in the ski industry, right, is a pretty sort of new expanding thing, which is awesome. And then you look at the motorized and you're like, oh man, that's even more intimidating. So please talk about your experience with that.
I'll start by saying I was super fortunate, and my first snowmobile mentor was actually another woman, a friend of mine. I went up going to Alaska every year, going to snowboard on Thompson Pass, got introduced to snowmobiles, fell in love with it, came back here, bought one, and I was also very fortunate to meet a couple of individuals and basically beg them to let me come with them a couple days because I knew I couldn't keep up on Saturdays with the boys, but they offered to come out with me on Sundays and kind of let me play around. So I think just finding your community early, whether that's women, men, whoever, to Will's point, finding your mentors. But also for women, I think there is something to be said specifically for education. I think that just having women-specific courses, there are a lot of women getting into snowmobiling, but it's hard to say, okay, we're going to have a bunch of women-specific motorized courses. But I do think that having really approachable learning opportunities where the first the first education event isn't you on snow having to go through like a full day of I don't even have like control of my sled yet, and just having those stepping stones and having spaces where women can start to feel comfortable asking questions. There's a couple like snowmobile clubs, and also there's like an all-women snowmobile club in Star Valley, and they do maintenance courses and what's in your pack courses and a lot of things that WYSAW does. But I think that creating those communities for women in the motorized space is really important, just so they feel like they can, be open and ask the hard questions.
Awesome. Yeah, and I know like A3 right now is working on some like motorized, not a lot of like specific courses for motorized users up to like a pro level are offered many places, right? And so those opportunities are just so limited. And that's looking positive, though. Like I know Gen Ready and A3 are really working towards having motorized specific like protocols for how these things should look on a different device, right? Will, can you talk a little bit about like educational side of things? Like, I don't know, like, are there a lot of courses available? Where are they at predominantly?
Yeah, I mean, there's more and more. Matt and I were part of the first group of snowmobilers to go through the ARI ITC. So at the end of that class, there were like 10 or 12 in the country. And since they're every year, there have been more and more. So the pool is growing, and that's awesome. Because if there's just one small company saying, hey, you guys should all get avalanche training, like nobody's going to listen. But if there's a big network out there, I think that's going to help, produce change in the culture. Kind of going off what Tana was saying too, I think something Matt and I have kicked around with our company is starting to offer a course that's below a level 1, because I think that barrier of entry is pretty intimidating for a lot of people. So I know for a while, and it might still be, A3 had like the Intro to Avalanches course, which would be like a one-day field, some riding skills, how to identify avalanche terrain, and like identifying like this is where you should go work on skills so that you're not at risk to be caught in an avalanche.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Totally, it's easy. Like we have a State of the Snowpack all winter offered in Jackson, right? Which is a great thing to kind of like meet community members, like keep updated on the snowpack, or just make sure like what you're seeing in the snow is what like other professionals are seeing. And you look out into these other communities and like how many are offered there? Really not any at all, which we're hoping to change this year and have them in different places. But even just those little things really help us as recreators, inform us a lot, and even without us realizing it a lot of the time, just having those opportunities. So what else are we missing in this conversation about motorized use, especially in those island zones again? Did I ask that already? No, I did, okay, great. I was like, did I misread on my paper? The blank faces.
One thing we haven't talked a lot about yet, we've touched on it and gone around it, but the behaviors that we have and the things that we can change to have different outcomes. Right now, one thing that I've noticed just observing groups in multi-use areas, and I'm talking just in general, snowmobiles, skiers, horseback, dirt bike, everybody's so quick to assume the worst about every situation. And the fact of the matter, we just have to realize that every group's got their assholes, guys. We've got to quit judging other groups by those one or two guys that, Murphy needs to take care of them. We just can't continue to judge each other according to that. And I personally know some of those guys in the snowmobile community that Murphy needs to take care of, and I don't even know how they're still alive. But yet they are, and yet they keep making bad decisions, and yet they keep making us look like fools. So when we do see that, let's assume the best. And then the thing that I've found to combat that is approaching another user, especially when I'm over here in Jackson, specifically in the Mosquito. I've met a lot of really cool skiers, snowboarders, and stuff like that, and people that we've been able to collaborate with. And back in the good old days of being youthful and riding for the Boondockers movies, we shot a lot of films with those guys, did a lot of help with Teton gravity research, filming that. And some of the best days that I've had is collaborating with the skiers and snowboarders and building just gigantic hucks and enjoying the snow and everything like that, towing them up and then letting us hit their jumps after they were done and stuff like that. And all it took was for me to not judge and just walk over to their truck and just say, "Hi, my name is." That's all it took to bridge that gap. And that's the behavior change that we need to start doing. And that's behavior change that I did. And now that I've been doing that at ISSW, at parking lots, and in all those places, meeting new people, new disciplines, new uses, and everything like that. You know, one more point to bring it home. Down in Utah, loved dirt biking down there. Was really flabbergasted that I got shot at by a horseback user. Got shot at twice. And one was close enough that I could hear the bullet go by. And I just was amazed. I could not believe it. Me and the other riders that we were with, the impatience. And it's like, dude, if you would have took a second, like we were coming up this V valley, like how could you expect us to see you? How could you expect us to know that you were there? Yeah, dirt bikes are loud. Dirt bikes can come up and they can spook the horses. And we get that. And it's like, soon as we saw the guy, we changed and went completely different. And it's like, that's a really good example because the situation that we were in, that we couldn't help the disturbance that we were creating. But there's a more amicable solution. There's a solution to bring us together, not a solution to separate us. It could have been like, shoot, I don't even know a good solution in that situation. I just know that the situation that arose was really crappy, and it created a lot of antagonism. And the other people that were with me still to this day hold a resentment to horseback riders. And we were riding through some terrain this last week, and one of those guys were like, "Oh, he's a horseback rider. He's probably just getting ready to shoot at us right now, big jerk." And I'm like, dude, not all horseback riders are going to take shots at us, man. Just chillax for 2 seconds. Like, why don't you go over there and introduce yourself? And I bet you find out that he's a pretty cool guy. Like, I know a lot of horse owners, and they're pretty fantastic guys. And so now that I've labored that point, that's the behavior change that we can make. Take the time, go talk to them, find out who they are. But just like in anything in life, sometime we're going to find they're just not that great of a person. And now you know. It doesn't have anything to do whether they're into snowmobiles or dirt bikes or horse riding. You can just just not going to work out, man. Move on with life.
Awesome.
I'm really hopeful. I think collaboration is really possible. Both my Pro 1 and my Pro 2 was a hybridized class. So we had like a motorized field group and a skier-based field group, and then we'd come back together. We'd have morning meetings together and then go to the field and then come back for the PM sessions. And that collaboration was awesome. I think both different user groups were able to learn from each other in like ways that none of us really predicted. And I think that was a really positive, exciting thing about our pro classes that we took.
I think to piggyback on both of what you guys were just saying too is like, you're just talking about communication and like pre and post and building community and finding out who the bad eggs are through conversation and who you want to be around. But that community aspect in conversation and communication is huge. And from the SAR side of things, you know, after a mission, we always debrief. And usually one of the like hot notes that we have where things go wrong or where we had issues is with communication. And what I think we have a issue is with our communities is communication between the human-powered and the motor-powered. There just isn't much communication between the two communities, and hopefully, like, as time progresses, there will be more and more communication. But earlier, like, with Ethan's presentation, and just, like, building community, like, going at the trailheads, and, like, if you see some snowmobilers there, and you're human-powered, there's a good chance that they might have gone a little further than you did that day. And so you could be like, hey, what, not for everybody, but pretty good chance. You know, like, what did you see out there? Like, get those data points from them, and I don't think anybody's gonna like hide stuff from you. They'll be like, hey, yeah, we were up on Lighty, and we triggered a couple remote avalanches up there on the southeast aspect. Weird. Stuff like that. So it was just like having that communication, building that communication, and to go back to the first question, like where has it been in the last 5 years and where it's going in the next 5 years, one thing I see where it is going is more and more snowmobilers and snow bikers and that kind of stuff have this huge interest in AVI education because of those staggering statistics that you showed us of those fatalities and how many are motorized. And a lot of it, you know, like the silver lining is like it is showing this moto community like, hey, we need to get this education so this stops happening. And so any way that you can welcome that in and create that communication between the two user groups, I think is going to help the entire community in the long run.
Yeah, I totally agree with everything that you guys said. And I guess the last thing that I would just kind of put a bow on with communication is, you know, not only going to talk to people and, you know, collaborating and introducing yourself, but also when you don't understand something or why someone did something, asking questions. You know, I've seen, you know, motorized to motorized, I've seen snowmobilers in areas where I'm like, I don't know if they know they probably shouldn't be here based on their situation. And probably 1 out of 10 times I've had someone basically tell me to, you know, F off. But most of the time, you know, when we end up, you know, why is this person, you know, in this area? Or why did this, you know, we're skiing, why did this snowmobiler, you know, high mark over near these skiers? Like, instead of saying like, you know, F you, like, I can't believe they did that, sometimes they don't necessarily know, they don't have that awareness of like, I didn't realize that I was putting you at danger, I'm so sorry. So sometimes opening up that conversation, sometimes it might not go your way, but I would say the majority of the time, somebody is really grateful that you came and, you know, gave them an opportunity to learn and just offered your, you know, your help. So I would just say, let's be friends.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks you all, and really interesting thoughts on communication, which is pretty big. That's our role as the Avalanche Center, right, is to sort of, you know, keep a mental model of what's happening in these snowpacks in like a very large range, which is pretty hard, but also just our primary role is to communicate well with a large group of people, right? And it's really easy to forget how wide of a swath that user group can be. So just bearing that in mind, but also communication is like a really good tool for both groups, right? Like last year sledding, we ran into a kid who like his track had just totally come off his sled, which I don't know much about sledding, but I knew that that was not supposed to look like that. And, you know, motorized users are often really spaced out. I was like, oh, isn't this great? Like integrating these tools into education, we can, you know, teach maybe like the same breaks that we take for skiing or regrouping, like motorized users, you know, those tools are applicable as well. Similarly, skiing around the front four is gonna get busier every year, right? And more often than not, I have the benefit, this is my job, right? I just am mostly out there to observe people in the snow and try to speak to that in a forecast that I think will benefit them. But usually when I'm like skinning and I'm trying to catch up with someone to like say hey or whatever, they just start walking faster and faster, which I'm sure we've all seen at the trailhead, right? And I just want to encourage, yeah, intergroup communication as well is going to be really important, both sides moving forward, just as there's more users in both groups, and just, yeah, keeping all these things in mind moving forward as our Avalanche Center evolves, and I'm really psyched on this community. So, thanks. Also, there's a movie we'll talk about.
Yeah, this was kind of impromptu, but my partner Matt and I produced a film last winter and this summer with Dave McClure and Riley Kincaid. Riley's father was one of the statistics Ethan reported on from 2020. Yeah, and this is a sales pitch for motorized users to go get avalanche education. It's only 7 minutes long.
Awesome. And I'll play it, but I wanted to ask, was there anything else that any of you wanted to say before we play that? All right.
If there's any skiers that are moto curious, there's a good chance you'll get into it and then only snowmobile for a good portion of your life, and then realize that both are really awesome and then do both of them. But I would say if you get a chance to get a mentor and get out on a sled, it is pretty phenomenal. I don't know user-wise if we're skier heavy or snowmobile heavy. I think a little more skier heavy right now, but it does open up some amazing terrain. So if you get a chance to get out there and get into it, it's phenomenal. That's all I want to say.
Nobody should ever have to experience the feeling of riding out of the mountains without their buddy. The night before he passed, he said, if I die tomorrow, I'm okay with it. I've lived a good life, and that was the Rob. Rob was so kind and such a good person that he said that for us so we can cope with the fact that he's not here anymore. I felt like he would tell me, God hates a coward. You know, you can't walk away from this that we've built.
When I was a kid, I had no idea that I was ever going to become a professional snowmobiler. I don't know if I was born in the right place or moved here at the right time. I don't take it for granted, and I'm just out there trying to do the best I can and ride this roller coaster as long as it lasts, because it's freaking awesome.
Town's 8,885 feet, right? That's 2,000 feet higher than God's country.
I was on that ride that my dad passed away, and after witnessing that, I was like, it's a big deal. So it was just panic, like everybody's scared. After witnessing that, I was in the same boat as Dave. Like, I wanted to give up snowmobiling. Like, it's way too dangerous. I don't want that to happen to anybody. I can't give up. Like, my dad wouldn't want me to give up just because that happened. Like, and I think it was a sign for me to get avalanche training. Like, I need it.
99% of the time, you're going to go out and you're not going to get in an avalanche, and you're not going to be affected by it, and everything's going to go okay. But that risk is always there, and I think one of the things that makes it hard for us to comprehend is that most of the time it doesn't happen. We might read about it in the news, or see a couple posts online of something bad happening in another state or somewhere far away from us. But when it happens to somebody close to you or in your community, or you have a close call, usually that's what would make somebody think twice and start to seek out education and realize that it's something that they have to address.
I think it was 2014. I was leading a group of clients, and I would consider myself a rookie at that point. And I had a pretty bad near miss where I triggered a sizable avalanche that definitely could have buried me. And it was a big wake-up call for me. And so that kind of sparked this desire to take more avalanche classes to become more knowledgeable about them. So in 2016, we headed out to Lake Tahoe, my business partner Matt and I, and we did an instructor-trainer course. And it was one of the first ever motorized specific avalanche instructor-trainer courses. And so from there, if I wanted to further my avalanche education, it was kind of through the route of becoming an instructor. And so that was pretty exciting to me, because my favorite part about being a snowmobile guide was teaching folks. And so it's kind of been a natural progression of going from guiding to becoming an avalanche instructor. To be a dialed mountain rider, you need to, get that formal avalanche training so that you know what to look for in the snowpack, as well as the terrain, and then understand kind of how the snowpack and the terrain coincide, to know when you have safe avalanche conditions to be out in big terrain. I think riding big terrain is something that a lot of us as mountain riders strive to do. You know, some of my most fond memories are days riding with really good buddies, like kind of like my A-team out in big mountains with a lot of avalanche terrain. It's fun to kind of push yourself in terrain like that, but it's really important to recognize that you need the right, you know, snowpack conditions to match that terrain. You know, as an avalanche educator, whenever there's a fatality in the West, we see a spike in people taking avalanche classes. And I think that's kind of what I'm trying to get at, is to convince people that that hazard's always out there, right? Every winter we're dealing with avalanche problems as mountain riders. And so let's get ahead of that. Let's be proactive and get the training so that we are making good decisions in the mountains and we get to come home.
You know, the way that we use the mountains in the backcountry as snowmobilers is different than a lot of other people, and it's really going the next step and not really just doing the easy things like buying the equipment and wearing it, but really digging into the training and learning how to use it, and most importantly, knowing how to avoid avalanches. You know, an avalanche rescue, even if you have all the gear and you have the training, is still gonna suck. There's no guarantee that just because you know how to use your transceiver that you're gonna save your riding buddy. There's so many things that are stacked against you that you just don't want to be in that position in the first place. And so it really takes a bigger understanding of terrain and the weather and the conditions and group dynamics. And that's the kind of stuff that is focused on in avalanche courses these days. The courses that are out there now are specifically catered to how we ride and how we interact with the mountains and everything that we do. And it's really, we've never been at a better time in the sport as far as the opportunities that are out there.
Does it keep going? There's awesome. Yeah, can we give a big hand for our panel? Thanks for a great conversation.